Dean and Sarah had planned the trip for months, mapping out the route with a kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred rituals. It wasn't just about reaching Atlanta for their friend's wedding. It was about everything in between. The journey, not the destination. They promised themselves they would savor every mile, every diner booth with cracked red vinyl, every national park trail that veered just slightly off the map. They left Los Angeles with the windows down and a playlist full of nostalgia. The warm California air whipped through the car, tangling Sarah's dark hair, and for the first few days, laughter came easily. The Subaru, dusty and cluttered already with half-empty water bottles and a growing collection of gas station receipts, was their cocoon, a little moving world of their own. Small towns blurred past, faded signs for antiques and homemade pie, forgotten main streets with rusting swing sets and paint-chipped benches. They took detours through hills that glowed golden in the sunlight, and paused at quiet lakes that seemed too still to be real. They danced barefoot under a thunderstorm in New Mexico, shared peaches in a Texas orchard where the fruit dripped down their wrists. Sticky and sweet, they were free, reckless in a way only long roads and summer skies allow. But by the end of the first week, something began to fray. The joy, once effortless, became something they chased instead of felt. Dean noticed it in the way Sarah sat quieter in the passenger seat, fiddling with the hem of her shirt, or staring blankly out the window for long stretches. The light in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something fogged and distant. He chalked it up to exhaustion, road fatigue, maybe, or a minor disagreement they hadn't voiced aloud. But deep down, a quiet tension began to thread through their days, subtle but persistent, like a song slightly off-key that no one wants to acknowledge. It was on the 8th day, as they drove out of Winfield, a small town tucked between hills and pine forests, that the change became undeniable. The town had been a strange stop, too quiet, with a diner where the jukebox only played static, and the cashier smiled without blinking. They didn't talk about it as they left, just filled the tank, grabbed coffees that tasted like burnt rubber, and got back on the road. Sarah tapped through her phone with a frown. No signal. Dean gave a half-hearted shrug, probably just a dead zone, but his voice didn't carry the usual lightness. The sun hung low as they followed what should have been a state highway east. The trees thickened, the shadows lengthened, their GPS flickered, the arrow blinking in place before spinning in lazy circles. Dean tapped the screen. Nothing changed. "It'll catch up," he said, more to himself than her. But Sarah didn't respond. Minutes turned to hours. The world outside became oddly repetitive. A rusted mailbox leaning at the same angle. A splintered road sign reading Meadow Creek Road. The exact same deer skull mounted on a fence post, 3 times now. Dean gripped the wheel tighter, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool air blowing from the vents. "This is wrong," he muttered. Sarah glanced at him, pale. "We've been here before, haven't we?" He didn't want to answer. Because yes, something was repeating. The same turn, the same narrowing road, the same silence. He pulled over. They sat in stillness for a moment. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water bottle. "Maybe we missed a turn," she offered. Voice small. Dean didn't respond immediately. He stared out at the woods lining the road. Too thick, too dark. The trees felt wrong, not just old, watching. Every instinct in him itched with unease. He stepped out of the car, trying to clear his head. Gravel crunched under his boots. The forest pressed in from all sides. A wall of pine and shadow. No birds, no wind, just silence. Not peaceful, hollow. Sarah joined him outside, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "What time is it?" Dean glanced at his watch. The screen was blank. She held up her phone. Still no signal. The stillness became unbearable. A tension that buzzed in the air, unspoken but sharp. Sarah's eyes darted down the road. "We should keep moving," she said. He nodded, but hesitated. There was something in the pit of his stomach, a sense that this wasn't just a detour gone wrong. Something had shifted, like stepping into a dream that didn't belong to you. They drove again. But the loop didn't break. The forest didn't let go. No matter how long they drove, how far the Subaru rolled forward, the trees remained the same, towering silhouettes, silent and still. The road twisted beneath them like a snake coiled in endless spirals. Dean's hands were clenched around the wheel, his knuckles bone white, while Sarah sat rigid beside him. Her body turned slightly away as if bracing for something she couldn't name. The radio, long silent, gave a single burst of static, and then nothing. Sarah reached forward and turned the dial slowly, as if expecting music to trickle back. It didn't, only silence. Even the hum of the tires on asphalt seemed quieter, swallowed by the dense wall of forest surrounding them. She stared out the windshield, her voice low and sharp. "Dean, I think we're going in circles." He didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Nothing behind them but the same unbroken trail. No road signs, no other cars, no change in light. It was late afternoon. It had been late afternoon for what felt like hours. Finally, he exhaled, the breath shaky. "I know." Sarah turned to look at him, her voice tightening. "You knew?" Dean nodded once, jaw clenched. "I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. I kept thinking, maybe we're just turned around, maybe we're tired. But I know that tree, that one with the gash in the bark." She looked. A tall pine, its trunk slashed with a diagonal scar that looked disturbingly like a claw mark. She had noticed it earlier. Twice, maybe 3 times. A sick feeling began to rise in her stomach. "I marked it," Dean said quietly. "About an hour ago. I used the car key." Sarah stared at him. "I wanted to be sure," he added. "It's the same one." They pulled over, the car's engine clicking softly as it cooled. The silence that followed felt like a wall falling between them and the world. Sarah stepped out, gravel crunching under her shoes. The air felt heavier out here. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring down the road as if sheer will could make it shift, or split, or lead them somewhere else. Dean joined her, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's like we're inside something. Not lost, trapped. Like a loop," Sarah whispered. He glanced at her. She looked different in the failing light. Older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Her eyes were red, and not just from exhaustion. "This doesn't make sense," she said. We're not dreaming, are we?" Dean wanted to lie. To say, of course not, that this was still the real world, bound by physics and logic and cell towers and highway signs. But then came the cold again, a sudden gust of air. Not natural wind, but a deep chill that slid between the trees and wrapped around them like fingers. Sarah shivered violently. "Did you feel that?" Dean nodded. "It's colder here than it should be. We need to get out of the car," Sarah said suddenly, eyes fixed on something deeper in the forest. "If we keep driving, we'll just keep looping, but maybe on foot. We could find something, a path, a way out." Dean hesitated. Every instinct in him screamed not to leave the vehicle, but staying wasn't helping either. They packed hastily. A flashlight, a water bottle, their phones, even though they still showed no service. Sarah grabbed the small Swiss Army knife she kept in the glove compartment and slipped it into her jacket pocket without a word. They stepped into the forest. The trees swallowed them immediately. It was like walking into a cathedral built from bone and shadow. Towering trunks, heavy branches arching overhead, the canopy so thick that daylight struggled to pierce through. The forest floor was soft and soundless, covered in a carpet of damp moss and leaves that muffled their every step. They didn't speak. Every noise seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves, the crack of twigs underfoot, their own breathing. At one point, a branch snapped sharply behind them, and they froze, hearts pounding. Dean spun with the flashlight. Nothing, just trees and silence. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered. Dean paused. There was something, faint, a soft, rhythmic sound, like whispering, but not in any language he knew. It came and went like wind through hollow bones. Sarah's hand reached for his, and he took it. "Don't let go," she said. Her voice was steady, but her grip trembled. They kept walking. The path, if it could be called that, twisted sharply through the trees. A strange light began to glow up ahead, dim and pulsing. At first, Dean thought it was headlights, or a reflection of something metal. But as they got closer, he realized it came from a cabin, half sunken into the ground, wrapped in thick ivy and branches. The structure looked ancient, not old in years, but old in essence, like it had always been there, waiting. The windows flickered with a pale blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Sarah stopped. "Dean, this feels wrong." "I know. Should we go in?" He looked around. The forest pressed against them like a vice. The cabin might be a trap, or it might be shelter. But staying out here wasn't an option. He reached for the door. It opened before his hand touched it. A woman stood there. Her features were indistinct, not masked, but constantly shifting, as if the air between them couldn't hold a stable image. Her smile was warm, too warm. "Welcome," she said. "You must be tired." Dean took a step back. Sarah didn't move. "We don't mean to intrude," Dean said. "We're just lost," the woman finished. "Yes, I know." Dean and Sarah exchanged a glance. "Come inside," the woman said, stepping back. "There's food, a fire. You need rest." The scent of burning wood drifted from within, but also something else, something sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in water. Sarah hesitated and stepped inside. Dean followed. The door creaked shut behind them, and the forest fell silent. The cabin was warm, unnaturally so. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, though Dean couldn't feel its heat. The flames moved like they were underwater, slow and distorted. Shadows danced across the wooden walls, not the kind made by flickering firelight, but deeper, longer, wrong. Sarah stood beside him, stiff, her hands still locked in his. She hadn't let go since they entered the forest. The woman, or what looked like a woman, glided across the room, graceful in a way that made Dean's stomach twist. Her dress was plain but clean, her dark hair pinned back. Her eyes shimmered too brightly in the firelight, like glass catching the sun. Her smile never faltered. "There's food on the table," she said, gesturing with a hand too thin and too still. "You must be hungry." They weren't. Dean realized that suddenly he hadn't felt hunger in hours, maybe days, just a dull ache, like something deeper than the stomach. Sarah moved slowly toward the table, eyes scanning everything, the mismatched plates, the steaming stew that smelled faintly of earth and copper. She didn't sit. Dean joined her. "We're not eating that." The woman's head tilted. "It's safe. You're safe now." He didn't respond. The walls of the cabin were covered in strange markings. Not quite symbols, not quite writing, curved, looping, almost organic. They reminded Dean of vines or veins, something alive. Sarah touched one with the tip of her finger. It pulsed beneath her skin, faint but unmistakable. She jerked her hand back. The woman watched them without blinking. "You've been running in circles. I've seen it before. The forest does that to people." Dean turned to her. "Where are we?" She gave a soft laugh. "You're in the middle, the center of the loop." "The loop?" Her smile widened. "A space between, a forgetting place. It finds those who are untethered." Dean's blood chilled. "You mean we're dead?" The woman laughed again, but it was emptier this time. "No, not dead, just misplaced." Sarah stepped forward. "Then how do we get out?" The woman looked at her with something close to pity. "You don't leave the loop. You either accept it, or you vanish." Dean's fists clenched. "That's not an answer." "There isn't one," she said simply. "Not in the way you want." A long silence fell. The fire crackled behind them, but it felt like a soundtrack. Not a real sound, like someone playing the idea of warmth. Dean turned back toward the door, but when he looked at it, it wasn't a door anymore. Just wall, timber and nails. Seamless. Sarah gasped. Dean rushed forward, running his hand along where the frame should have been. Nothing. No gap. No exit. He spun toward the woman. "What is this place?" She stepped closer, and for the first time, her expression changed. Not a smile, not warmth. Something ancient. Sad. "This place isn't yours," she said quietly. but it's inside you now. It reflects. Dean felt dizzy. Reflects what? She looked at Sarah. The cracks in you. The things you hide from each other. The truth you refuse to see. The floor creaked beneath their feet. Long moaning sounds like the house was breathing. Dean looked down. Something beneath the floorboards moved. Slow. Coiling shapes that left faint trails behind them. Sarah backed away from the table. Dean, we need to go. Now. There's nowhere to go, the woman said. You brought it with you. The air shifted, thick, like syrup. The walls pulsed with light. That same strange blue glow they'd seen outside, now threading its way through the seams and corners of the cabin like veins. The woman's voice lowered. It was always coming. The loop doesn't trap people. People bring the loop with them. Dean grabbed Sarah's arm. We're leaving. I don't care how. The woman didn't try to stop them. She simply turned back toward the fire, her form beginning to flicker, like static in human shape. Dean yanked Sarah toward the far wall. There had to be a way out, a window, a crack, a weakness. He threw his shoulder against the wood. It didn't give. Then Sarah stopped him. Her fingers gripped his wrist. Wait. What are you? She was staring at the wall. A mirror had appeared. They hadn't noticed it before, but there it was, hanging between two shelves stacked with decaying books. The glass was dull, clouded, not reflecting the room or them. It reflected something else. The forest, but not just the trees. Something massive shifting through them, a dark shape with too many limbs and no face. It moved slowly, as if swimming through fog. Dean stepped closer. What is that? Sarah was pale. It's what's following us. The image in the mirror pulsed. The shape moved closer. Not through the forest, but through the mirror itself, as if it were using the glass as a doorway. The surface shimmered, and Dean saw a flicker of something impossible, a memory he hadn't thought of in years, a hospital room, a voice saying he might not wake up. The mirror wasn't just a window, it was a wound. Sarah turned away, breathing hard. We can't stay here. The wall beside the mirror cracked. Just a hairline. But it was enough. Dean didn't hesitate. He grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it at the mirror. Glass shattered, the sound sharp and strangely musical. The wall cracked again, and this time the break spread, like lightning across wood. A rush of air burst through, as if the cabin exhaled. The woman by the fire turned toward them. Her face was gone, not damaged, just blank, a smooth sheet of skin, still smiling. Dean grabbed Sarah's hand. They ran. The cabin collapsed behind them as they stumbled into the forest, the walls falling inward like paper. The sound of splintering wood echoed far too long, like it was coming from beneath the ground rather than behind them. They didn't look back. The forest greeted them again, darker now, colder. The trees were the same, but the feeling had changed. Less like they were being watched, and more like they were being remembered. Sarah leaned against Dean, gasping, "Where are we now?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know. But he knew one thing for certain. Whatever the loop was, it wasn't finished with them. Not yet. The forest had changed, not in a way that could be charted on a map or marked by a compass, but in the way a dream becomes a nightmare without you realizing when or how. Dean and Sarah stumbled forward, breaths ragged, the echo of the cabin's collapse still reverberating through the bones of the woods. There was no path anymore, no road, no direction, only trees, tall, narrow, skeletal. Their branches clawed at the sky like fingers locked in permanent agony. "Dean!" Sarah's voice cracked as she slowed behind him. One hand pressed against her ribs. "Stop. Just wait." Dean turned, his face streaked with sweat, his eyes wild with unspoken panic. But he stopped. They both did. The silence pressed in like a vice. They hadn't heard birds in hours. No wind, no rustle of leaves, just the faint, distant creak of wood, like the forest had joints that needed oiling. Sarah sat on a half-buried stump, hugging herself. It wasn't real. That woman, that house, none of it was real. Dean knelt beside her. It was real enough to trap us. She shook her head. "We saw something in that mirror." "I know." "I saw my dad," she said, her voice trembling. "I saw his face the night before he left. I haven't remembered that in years. I buried it so deep I forgot it ever happened. And the loop, it pulled it out." Dean didn't answer. He couldn't. His own mind had been cracked open in that room, that hospital memory. He hadn't told Sarah about it, had barely told himself. The accident, the coma, the weeks of drifting in a place not unlike this one. Maybe that's what the loop fed on. Trauma, regret, memory. "I think this place, it's not just physical," he said slowly. "It's emotional, psychological. It's like it's made of what we don't say." Sarah looked up at him. "So what do we do? Talk about our feelings until the trees let us go." Dean forced a smile, but it faded fast. Then, footsteps. Not theirs. Heavy, deliberate, crunching twigs. They both froze. The steps were close, too close, but came from nowhere. The forest was too dense to see more than 10 feet ahead. Dean grabbed Sarah's hand again and moved toward the densest cluster of trees, pulling her behind him. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, a whisper. "Dean." It came from everywhere and nowhere, like the voice was inside his own skull. Then, "Sarah." She gasped. "It's mimicking us," Dean whispered. "It knows our names." Then Then the whisper changed. Only one leaves the loop. Dean backed against the trunk of a tree. That voice, that's what the woman said. She said we had to choose, Sarah whispered. But we didn't. We broke the mirror. We ran. Dean's heart pounded. Maybe running wasn't enough. A light flickered through the trees. It wasn't moonlight. It was too cold, artificial, like a distant car headlight bleeding through fog. They moved toward it. Branches clawed at their clothes and skin. One snapped against Dean's cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. He didn't stop. Then, open space. They burst through the last row of trees and staggered onto asphalt. The road, the same cracked, fading two-lane highway they'd entered the loop on. Dean stared at it. Sarah did too. Her voice broke the silence. Is it the same road, or just another piece of it? Dean didn't answer. He stepped forward and placed a foot on the pavement. Nothing happened. They walked. The trees slowly gave way to wider shoulders. A mile marker appeared. No number, just a rusted pole and a smear of peeling paint. Sarah squinted ahead. I think I see a car. And she was right. Parked on the side of the road was a blue sedan. Old, but intact. Lights off. Windows fogged. They approached slowly. Dean circled to the driver's side. There was someone inside. A woman. Motionless. Her forehead resting against the steering wheel. Dean knocked once. She flinched and jerked upright, eyes wide and bloodshot. She looked at them with horror that turned to confusion and then to relief. You're real, she rasped. Dean nodded slowly. We think so. She opened the door with a trembling hand. I've been here for, I don't know how long. Days? Weeks? Sarah leaned in. You're trapped too. The woman nodded. It's a loop. It feeds on your memories, your fears. It shows you versions of people you've lost, places you've never been, and it keeps going. You think you're free, and then... You're back where you started, Dean finished. The woman's eyes widened. You've seen it too. Dean hesitated. Have you found a way out? Her gaze dropped. There's a way, she said. But it's not a good one. Sarah stiffened. What do you mean? The woman stared down the road. The loop. It gives you a choice. One of you can leave. The other has to stay. Dean felt his stomach drop. That's what the woman in the cabin said, Sarah whispered. The woman nodded. But here's the thing. If neither of you chooses, it keeps going. Forever. Dean looked at Sarah. She looked back. A long silence. Then the woman said, "I tried to leave once. Tried to drive straight through. Didn't matter how fast or how far. I always came back to this stretch of road. I saw myself driving behind me, looping." Dean's voice was quiet. "So what do we do?" The woman shrugged. "You run. You hide. You hope. Or..." She looked them both in the eyes. "You decide." The woman sat back in the driver's seat, staring ahead, like the road would suddenly answer all of their questions. Her voice was thin, stretched by time and solitude. "I stopped trying to count the days or years. The loop doesn't work on time. It works on fear." Dean and Sarah stood beside the sedan, cold creeping through their jackets. The air felt thinner now, like the forest had pulled away slightly, holding its breath, waiting. Sarah broke the silence. "Who are you?" The woman blinked. "Call me Ellie. Doesn't matter anymore." Dean leaned down. "How long have you been here, Ellie?" She didn't look at him. "Long enough to forget the names of everyone I left behind." The words hit Sarah hard. She looked away, jaw clenched. "Ellie," Dean said, "you mentioned a choice. That one person can leave." She nodded. "Yes, but you don't choose together. The loop makes you choose, alone. It finds you when you're most vulnerable, whispers to you, shows you things, makes you believe it's the only way out." Sarah crossed her arms tightly. "What happens to the person who stays?" Ellie's voice dropped. "They forget. Slowly. They become part of it, like echoes in the trees." Dean's stomach turned. "We heard voices in the forest." "Maybe they were people once," Ellie said softly. "Now they're just fragments." Silence again. The weight of those words settled over them like dust. Then Ellie opened her glove box and pulled out a wrinkled notebook. She handed it to Sarah. "I wrote down everything I could. Maps that don't work. Paths I've walked 100 times. Signs that shift when you're not looking." Sarah opened it. Pages filled with diagrams, sketches, notes in jittery handwriting. Some of the text was repeated, as if written during a panic. "Don't believe the lights. Don't turn when it whispers. Don't separate." Dean read over her shoulder. "You've tried everything." Ellie's hands shook. "And I'm still here." Dean looked at Sarah. "We can't stay." "I know." "Then we need to make the loop show itself again," he said. "Make it force the choice." Ellie looked at him, horrified. "You don't want that." "I'd rather face it than wander forever," Dean said. "Wouldn't you?" But Sarah hesitated. She stared down the road again. The yellow center lines stretched on endlessly, pulling the eye, the mind, into illusion. She suddenly wondered if there had ever been a real road, if Atlanta even existed anymore. "Ellie," she said, "how did the loop try to make you choose?" Ellie turned away. Her voice was barely audible. "It took someone from me." Sarah's chest tightened. "Who?" "My sister. She was in the car with me. We were on our way to visit my dad in hospice. We were fighting about everything. And then, the loop." Sarah sat on the pavement beside her. "And..." Ellie swallowed. "I woke up one night. She was gone. I searched for hours, days. Finally found her, at that cabin. Only it wasn't a cabin anymore. It was our childhood home." Dean stepped closer. "What happened?" Ellie wiped a tear. It made her think I'd already chosen to leave her behind. She believed it. She walked into the woods, saying she wouldn't make me choose again. That was the last time I saw her. Dean didn't speak. He didn't know what to say. "I screamed," Ellie said, "begged the loop to give her back. But it was silent. Always silent." Sarah stared at the trees. "So maybe it wins when it breaks us apart." Dean looked down the road again. "Then we don't let it," he said. But even as he said it, something deep inside him stirred. An old fear he thought he'd buried. That night in the hospital, when the machines beeped around him, when the doctors whispered to his parents in the hallway, he had drifted then, far from his body, and something had followed him back. Something cold and quiet that waited behind mirrors and in dreams. Now, here, it was closer. The forest rustled suddenly. A low, whispering wind swept through the trees. The lights appeared again, dim orbs glowing faintly between trunks, flickering like will-o'-the-wisps. Sarah stood up. "Dean, I see them." Ellie got out of the car, breathing hard. "Don't follow them. That's how it starts." But the lights began to form a path, a corridor of faint glows winding back into the woods. A voice drifted through the trees. Familiar. Software. Dean turned. "Mom," he whispered. Sarah stepped toward him. "Dean, don't." But his eyes were glazed. It's her voice. She used to sing that when I couldn't sleep. Sarah grabbed his arm. "It's not her." He looked at her, and for a second, he wasn't sure. Then he saw the notebook in her hands. Ellie's scrawled warnings. "Don't follow the lights." Dean backed away. The lights flickered, then vanished. The road was dark again. Ellie stared at both of them. That's how it begins. The loop doesn't always look like a loop. Sometimes it looks like closure, or comfort, or forgiveness. Dean sat down hard on the pavement. "So, what the hell do we do?" Ellie looked up at the sky. "I don't know, but staying still won't help." Sarah closed the notebook. "Then we keep moving." Dean stood, nodding. "Together," he said. Ellie didn't follow. "I'm staying," she said. "Maybe you'll get further without me." Sarah stared at her. "You sure?" Ellie gave a sad smile. "It's been a long time since I believed in escape, but maybe you'll make it further than I did. Just don't turn on each other. That's when it wins." Dean nodded. They walked forward, hand in hand, down the endless blacktop road. Behind them, the forest closed in once more, and the loop watched, waiting. The sun was rising, or at least something that looked like it. A pale light filtered through the trees, diffused and colorless, casting long, spidery shadows across the cracked road. Dean and Sarah walked side by side, hand in hand, boots dragging through the dust. Neither spoke. Their clothes were torn, stained with earth and ash. Their faces pale, hollow, eyes too wide, as if they'd seen something that never left them. Ahead, the road split. Again. To the left, a path lined with rotting signposts and trees that leaned unnaturally inward. To the right, a clearer road, wide and smooth, basked in that strange golden light. Dean paused. "So, this is it?" he asked softly. Sarah didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around his. They chose the right path. They walked and walked and walked. Eventually, the forest thinned. A clearing, a rusted sign stood crooked at the edge of the trees, faded white letters barely legible beneath years of grime. "Welcome to Winfield. Population 347.7. Dean stopped in his tracks, his heart clenched. "No," he whispered. Sarah's voice cracked. "We already left. This can't be." But it was. The same cracked sidewalk, the same rusted diner sign creaking in the wind, the same gas station blinking its open sign in stuttering neon. Dean turned in place, eyes scanning the familiar horror. It was all back, exactly as they had found it the first time. A man exited the diner across the street, coffee in hand, whistling a low tune. He looked up at them, smiled. New in town. Dean didn't answer. Sarah took a step back. The man blinked slowly. His smile never changed. "Don't worry," he said, sipping his coffee. "Most folks find their way. Eventually." Behind them, the wind picked up, the forest whispered, and from far down the road, an engine hummed. Another car, another couple, another beginning. Dean turned to Sarah. Her eyes were glassy. A single tear traced her cheek. "We never left," she said. Dean didn't correct her. They just stood there, holding hands, watching as the road curled behind them, a perfect, endless circle.